nobody wants to micromanage, and we're having an epidemic of trying to develop leaders in this industry because people are like, I don't want your job. It's terrible.
Hello. The Pre-Shift podcast is back for another year, and I'm excited to kick it off with the man you just heard, Jason Berkowitz. After a long career in restaurant ops, Jason created ArrowUp. It's a modern training platform for hospitality, so naturally we get into all things training and how ArrowUp's approach to relatable and engaging programs really helps restaurants grow their teams. I don't know how they do it, but they've somehow managed to make things like compliance and mandated safety training like not boring at all. I will let the conversation speak for itself, but before I do, I just want to welcome any listeners back and give a warm welcome to anyone joining us for the first time. As always, I'm DJ, and the Pre-Shift podcast is brought to you by 7 Shifts. Enjoy the show. Hey, Jason, how's it going today?
Fantastic. Yourself?
Doing pretty well. I just want to kick right off with it. So your career in hospitality, spanned some interesting stops. Umami Burger, which is an old favorite of mine in New York, and Takoya Organica, to name a few. So I'm curious about that phase of your career, and then also like what made you want to jump from being in operations to founding a technology company? Because it's a pretty big leap.
What's interesting is thanks. Those are great brands that I absolutely love. And what's unique about both of those brands, I mean, just to dive right in, is they both had lines out the door when they brought me on board. And I loved that because it was something that was working from a guest perspective. And what they needed help with was they were ready to take on some capital and scale. And so we needed to put structure in place so that we can actually grow efficiently, attract the right team, and level up. And in both instances, the first thing I did was say, okay, nobody talked to me for the first 30 days. I'm not even opening up my email because I need to put a training and standard operating procedure in place, at least training for every position. And if the second I try to be an operator, being their lead operator in both instances, then I'm no longer able to be proactive, right? Because then I'm trying to build the ship and sail it at the same time. And the thing we understand in operations is it's always trying to balance what's urgent and what's important. And if you're an operator, you're always going to be fighting fires and putting out, managing what's urgent. But if you're not somewhat clearing the brush and taking care of things, of what's important, they become urgent. And so in both of those instances, the first thing I did was put an awesome training book together, and which was another great way to actually get around, learn the company, and learn the team members, because to anybody listening, you don't need to do it all yourself. In fact, you shouldn't. You should let everybody know what you're doing, and then ask people to raise their hand and participate, because then you're going to get ground up, level up information. You're also going to see who wants to join with you. So that was really important to me. And as a COO in Tokaya, I then was just sort of like, I got to go build this training company. I love it. I see it. I'm in the boardroom. We're raising, $20 million, and I'm Googling, or not Googling, I'm doodling like time to burn, time to learn. I'm like, okay, I gotta get out of C-suite and I gotta go build something. And that's my story.
Yeah. Was there like an aha moment where you're like, I got to do this, or, when was that vision kind of crystallized for you?
I think that's a great question. Funny enough, I'd been working on it and I kept getting pulled back. It's like the old Godfather. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. And a fantastic real estate broker, restaurant broker, Rachel Rosenberg, who's been a great friend and fan, she was like, I know you're working on building, what was called Active Hospitality or ArrowUp. She's like, I need you to get back in. And this was Tokaya. Go meet the founders, go do this, put another couple of years under your belt and make this happen, get some equity. And so I'd always wanted, and then that 2-year itch happened right when I realized I'm no longer uniquely useful to this company. And that's what kind of happens with me is I'm great for that period where you want to put infrastructure in place and grow. Then when it comes down to the point that you've kind of found the players, leveled off, you're kind of cruising and then getting ready to take it to the next level, I'm off, because I like being the creative side of stuff. I don't necessarily love you don't want me to be the COO of a 150 unit restaurant concept. I'm not that guy. There's there's not enough innovation for me at that point. So that was it. And I had this vision, right? I've this strong belief that everyone just wants to know two things. What's my job and how am I doing? That's it. To anybody listening, you just got to answer those two questions. What's my job? Which is, you have to, it sounds easy, but it means you have to organize what that looks like, make sure it's efficient, document it, train it. And then how am I doing is feedback. That can be anything as any mechanism of a checklist to a formal review to infrequent check-ins and things like that. And it just kind of all clicked. And I was like, we're going. Now, then I launched Arrow Up, and it wasn't exactly what it's moving into today, and we can get into that in a little bit. But so, you have a great idea, but there's always a process and an arc to everything.
Absolutely. So beginning stage is Arrow Up. What did it look like you mentioned, and I guess for the uninitiated folks that don't know, you're a training platform for restaurants and hospitality. But what does that look like, and what's what is Arrow Up, I guess, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Arrow Up helps restaurants strengthen their employee experience so that they can deliver stronger guest experiences. And we do that through off-the-shelf training, custom training, as well as off-the-shelf or custom checklists, and then helping standardize SOPs. The meat on our bone is our courses that people license from us. And originally I had this idea, and which it's actually what we're coming around to, which is this matrix of the Arrow Up way of doing everything. And what's great is I've had the pleasure of not only putting training programs for fast casual or full service. Gucci Osteria, I helped them put their training program together to launch win a Michelin star. I mean, I've worked with some of the best chefs literally in the world and some of the local mom and pop shops. And I started my career at Burger King at 14. And what's great is once you divide between full service and cashier, quick service or fast casual, pretty much, unless you're real fine dining, 90% of it's going to be the same, of the training, of the standardizing it. You've got your menu and all that stuff, but how do we deliver service? What's the experience? How should a host be trained? It's really kind of the same. So I've always had this vision of building out this matrix, this catalog of the Arrow Up way to do everything for myself who's had that experience. So from day one onboarding to how do you hold a drink, to how do you make a drink, to day one of a prep cook, how do you hold a knife, and what are great cutting techniques, all the way up to leadership. But I knew in 2019 when we launched that the world really wasn't ready for it. It was a little digitization. It wasn't ready. And so my partners were like, this is great, but let's start off with a need. So we kicked off with anti-harassment training because it was coming mandatory. And what was cool, as you say, anti-harassment training, but what was cool is we made it just for restaurants, and our course is just for restaurants. And we take this really unique approach that, like, we're all weird in this industry and misfits. And so we kind of disarm it, and we speak the language of restaurants. I wrote a book previously called Please Don't Sleep with the Host, and it's 50 tips for managing a functional, profitable restaurant. And it's like this cult, I would call it a cult classic. We're working on it, but people got it, right? And I'm like, cool. We're not going to be everything to everybody, but what's great is, we're in thousands of locations just with our anti-harassment. And then we did safety, then leadership development, where we helped develop a supervisor into a leader, because that was hard. My first day when I had, when I was 18 at college, and trying to hold my buddy, who we were drinking with together the night before, accountable for showing up, right? And so you just need these soft skill lessons. And now it's really growing in, I think, between the pandemic and everything and the world getting digital, we're building this out. It's pretty cool. We made a training program, minimal 1 for 7 shifts of, how to schedule, but that was just a little one. I mean, we got the matrix. It's ready to come, off the shelf, customizable. So I'm really excited for 2025. I mean, I'm jazzed.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's actually, it's funny you mentioned that. My next question I had was, before we get into kind of the nitty gritty, the visual style of the courses, I couldn't help but notice it. It feels like, a premium streaming platform with the thumbnails and, there's like first person video and, social media, TikTok style stuff. And, I guess I was just curious. It's not that typical, like white background, like overlit training video. That's like, this person in just very generic talking, like no personality. So I guess, you kind of answered the question. It's very much just to be in line with the hospitality industry.
Yeah, it's great. And I really appreciate you noticing that. I mean, first thing I did was grabbed a friend who's my favorite artist and who's the chief creative officer of our company. And his history was making commercials and just an incredible artist who's very good at distilling things and communicating them in a way that's relatable. So take legal speak, like anti-harassment. Well, how do we turn that into something that's relatable and not cheesy? Well, tell a story. And put some cool graphics and maybe do some word graphics behind it. Take a sensitive conversation where we interviewed somebody and overlay it with some amazing visuals. Also, if you can say it in a meme or a GIF and it lands, just do it. So to me, it's all about the constant general pressure. And as we're growing into this training partnership, what's cool is we train in these micro bites, but then we retrain and we reinforce through micro messaging. And what this is doing is it reduces the need for the leaders to micromanage. And nobody wants to micromanage. And we're having an epidemic of trying to develop leaders in this industry because people are like, I don't want your job. It's terrible. And so how do we make it suck less? Okay, well, let's put structure. Let's do this, right? Let's answer these two questions. What's my job and how am I doing? Well, if we can systematize that, then leaders can do what they love to do, which is they're in the hospitality industry. Let's build relationships, whether that's with your co-partners on the line, your cooks on the line, or out in front. And the art of it all matters, right? It's got to look pretty. It's got to feel pretty. And it's relatable, it's transferable to multiple generations. You have somebody telling a first-person story, 85 working in the industry or 15, it lands.
Yeah, and it's just, I think it's a style that a lot of folks want now. It's not just Gen Z, quote unquote. Gen Z loves TikTok. It's like, it's not just Gen Z. It's everybody.
Everyone's attention span has diminished.
Yes, for better or for worse. So before, like I said, I do want to get into some, brass tacks type of stuff. But, in practice, using ArrowUp, what does it look like for a restaurant? I'm a restaurant owner. Do I download an app? Do I go online? How do I get it to my employees?
It's great. I appreciate that. The whole thing with ArrowUp is to be as frictionless as possible. So it could be as simple as, hey, we just need a couple of these courses. Great. Here's a link. Put it in your onboarding. Click on it. They'll share a certification. We'll track it on the back end for you. Done. We'll charge you per, if you want, however you want to do. You want to do it, go per seat, per subscription. Great. Hey, we already have an app. Can we take your courses and upload it to them? Sure. Well, then we'll just figure out whatever type of pricing model that works, that's reasonable and fair, and there you go. Hey, can we use your app and make it a little bit more intense and where we can really track our employees and get going with it? Sure. We'll just turn it on and make it work for you. And that's what's key is the way that we're doing it is just turn it on and it just begins. Right? It just starts, okay, what's your role? Day one, here we go. What do you need to do? Because what happens is people have great ideas and owners learn what they need to do and they come off an expo and they're like, we got to do this. And then all the information gets lost. We're like, yeah, we know what you want to train them. We're just going to turn it on. It's going to go through. So the answer is we meet all operators where it's easiest for them with the least amount of friction to just turn it on. Because we just kind of play the law of averages with it all. And what's really cool is now we're working with insurance partners who are picking up the tab on some of these. And that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Because it's better for their bottom line, insurance-wise, if folks, are best practices and know what they're doing.
It's if you just literally, it's amazing. Put a training program that's consistent, have consistent follow-up with few checklist check-ins, 5 questions a week for somebody, things like that. You lower turnover. It's by an astonishing amount. You lower risk, you lower liability, you increase sales. It's all of these problems that I've solved as a lead operator. That's why, as the lead operator of a company, I knew that was the first thing I did before talking to anybody else, because I just knew. And I was like, yeah, if you're bringing me on board, you just got to trust. So I'm like, well, let's just do this for everyone and make it easy. Because again, it is very difficult for a team to start. They're building the ship and sailing it. So we come in and help.
Yeah. And I kind of, there's a nice little transition. I'm curious, is inconsistency just the biggest mistake that restaurants take when it comes to training their employees?
Well, I think lack of attention is the biggest mistake. So how do I feel like you're paying attention to me? How do I feel like I'm part of something, not just a number? So first off, are we paying attention to you and actually delivering something? Secondly, are we finding out that you're learning the way that it works for you to learn? And then thirdly would be, that there's no consistent way, especially if you're, working in multiple locations. Well, we do it like this over here. Well, we do it like that over here. So I think it's a combination of all of that. And you standardize it. And look, some cultures you can tweak it a little bit on the location. Okay. But let's get the chunk of 98% of it across the board. Let's put a system in place.
And just, it's that lack of attention to the training in general, the system in general, or the individual employee.
Telling the individual that this is a plan for you, right? It's just this. What's my job? Like, what does it mean to do my job, right? Like, do you care if I serve? Do we need to serve from the right or the left? Or does it not matter? Just keep my hand out of the guest's conversation. How does it work around here? What's the style of service? What's the vibe and what's the story we're telling? So that's what I mean. It's just lay it out for them.
Instead of just that makes sense. I think, what's that? 2 things. So when it comes to onboarding, right? We just did a survey last year. We wanted to understand employee desires, what they want, how they want to be paid, what's important to them, that kind of stuff. And a majority of folks want training, like, inside of 2 weeks. They don't want to be training any more than that when they start a new restaurant job. My guess is people want to, get right to it, start making money, start making tips, all of that. What do you see when it comes to like an effective onboarding in terms of length? And then from that, the balance of like that ongoing, is it better to have a strict policy where, after 3 months you do this training, after 6 months you do that, or is it more case by case? So I guess the first question is onboarding, what do you see when it comes to timing that and effective onboarding practices?
So the most important thing out of the gates is when I walk in the door as a new employee, does somebody expect me there? And does somebody care that I'm there? And does somebody spend time with me that I'm there? And that goes back to the idea of like giving attention, right? So I walk in the door, is it feeling like the playground? Like I'm the new kid on the playground and they're like, hey, what's up? Or are they, hey, Jason, cool. We told you're starting today. That's great. Greg's in the office, the GM or whomever is your boss. I'm going to grab him. He's finishing something up. He wants to come out and spend 15 minutes just talking to you. So right there, you're lowering your turnover, 20, 30%. People have said, I mean, it's insane numbers that it does. So right out of the gates, how am I being greeted? Who's talking to me? And what does that conversation look like? That conversation is like, hey, if I'm the GM, so excited, your interview is great. Welcome day one. How do we set you up for success here? What matters to you? What's going on? We'd love to keep you around. And then I tell them, do you have brothers or sisters, right? You just talk. It's part work, it's part personal. Because you're going to figure out what matters to ask about it. And then I'm going to tell you what matters to me. So that's day one. Then you prepare, you show them, and you set the expectation. You're right, 2 weeks is a long time even beyond that, right? It could, depending on the role, if you're a manager, sure, 30 days or whatnot, but within 5 to 7 days, you should be knocking this stuff out. Okay, well, here's your path. Here's the person that's going to be responsible for you. Meet Jenny, your trainer, so somebody's assigned with you. I think it's standardized based on what your role is. Yes, some people will say, I don't like day one HR everything. I really don't. Sure, anti-harassment training and all that stuff, but you could drip that in a little bit, some of that stuff. Get the fun in. Get them moving around in. Take them around and introduce them to people, right? Bring them into the fold so they feel comfortable and excited walking into work the next day. So that's the stuff. You show them what the training is, and then you lay it out. And look, to me, I think everyone says hi to everyone and walks around, and you learn the basics. And then I think you spend time on the expo, day 2. Here we go, because you got to learn what's coming out and what the food looks like and what the expectation is. And then you work through it. No matter what the position, you've got your training. So that's what I think you do. You keep it really tight. You absolutely have a scorecard with them after the shift. Somebody's responsible for them. Somebody's tracking. They're able to answer questions. And then every quarter, you put them on a reoccurring, or you join Arrow Up, and we put them on this reoccurring micro little pop-up that's just this micro reminders of why we put the sanitizer rag in the bucket, or what's important to us about stylist service, cleanliness. Here's a story of how somebody dealt with something. Depending on what your role is, you'll get something different. So I hope I'm answering it. I know I'm talking. I mean, I love to speak in stories, but you asked a really kind of like fundamental blocking and tackling question. So I was like, yeah, that's it.
No, yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely answering. And I'm curious, like with those like ongoing, quarterly drip feed type of things. Is that a case, like, let's say you see an employee that shows interest or you identify would be a great leader. Do you put them on that track? Do you kind of leave it open to everybody, or what's the best practices there?
Depends on the culture. And I love that idea of, you always want to have a growth mindset. It also depends on how big your restaurant group is. Are you a single location? Do you have the space to grow people or not? What's going on? Are you building a bench because you're growing, in which case you should always do it. But I love putting people on the growth trajectory. The worst thing you can do is not have people in the pipeline, and so you lose a supervisor, you need a supervisor, and my thing is 2 things. One is your supervisors are the bridge between the expectation and what gets executed. So, because they're on the front lines. So day 1, I go into a company myself, I'm getting to know the supervisors. They know where the bodies are buried. They know where the good is, the bad is. They're gonna spill the tea. It's all of that. And the other one is supervisors need more than the ability to comp food and a pair of keys to be successful. So you've got to start with soft skills and train them up and help them have these awkward conversations and empower them to know that actually holding everybody accountable is the coolest thing you can do, because organized people want to work in organized environments. People who want to be held accountable want to work accountable people want to work in environments that everyone's held accountable. And so I think that growth trajectory is huge. In anything, though, it's transparent. And here's what's cool. You can offer them the 2-minute weekly update, the 5-minute monthly update. And by the way, here's a catalog of courses. Let us know if you want to start taking those and spending 2 to 5 minutes on these little micro courses, or 12 minutes. I'll get the alert as a manager that Brian's doing this. So Brian showed me he's caring, and he'll elevate. So give him an opportunity to manage that information up. When I went to my first role as a supervisor, I was kind of chomping at the bit. And how do you know this? Because you're spending time talking to them, because you're not running around nagging people about stuff. So everything goes back to build relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really just, like you said, from the beginning, walking in the door, getting to know that person. there's those people that come in, they'll start a job and they're thinking to themselves, a month from now I'll be running this place, right? There's like those people that are chomping at the bit. And there's some people that just, they're working and they're in school and they want to just, kind of have a job and they're not looking to grow in the industry. And, but I guess I'm looking at your courses and just trying to understand it. It's all stuff that's relevant no matter where. A lot of it is relevant no matter where you are in your career. And then also I feel like a lot of it is just relevant to life skills as well.
I love that you caught that. Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's like, harassment, leading. One I'm curious about is the managing friends course. That's definitely a big one for restaurants for sure. How do you go about, building the courses and what kind of resources? I mean, is it built off your experience? I'm sure, but other folks as well.
So what was your study? 7 Shifts came out. I think it was 49%. I thought it was higher, but was it 49% of employees quit because of a bad manager?
Yeah, it was something. Right? I have to check. Yeah. I appreciate you dropping that stat.
Yeah, and from a great study that 7 Shifts did put together. So investing in the supervisors again matters. How do we put a course like that together? It starts with what's important, but what it really, the meat on it is, get really good supervisors and maybe some that aren't so great and interview them and get their story and get their quotes and get their, the little messages that they're going to drop, and then start to piece that together as far as something that feels relatable. As an example, so we interviewed this great 18-year-old girl, Kyla, and 18, what type of world experience does she have? She was just blowing us away with stories of good and bad leaders that she had. And she even talked about, she was like, and I love that, and we got this quote kind of in our opening pitch of like, how do I tell somebody they're doing something wrong? Because I don't want to sound mean, And then she was like, then I had a great leader who taught me, it's saying to them, look, I noticed you're doing it this way. I totally used to do that. Then someone showed me this way, and it's like, it became so much easier for me. Can you, check it out? And she's like, now I say it this way. And that's what it is. It's like, you can have all these platitudes. You need a tool to know that you can use in the minute when things are happening, right? Like, here's one, de-escalation. During the pandemic, we got brought on by the city of Santa Monica to help teach a 19-year-old how to have an awkward conversation with somebody who didn't want to follow rules. And I don't mean to bring up the pandemic. No one likes to talk about that. But the idea was, what we learned was we actually were building a course on empathy. And what they needed to do was find a way to agree with the person first. So we're giving these kids and these adults, right, they're these tools to say, okay, if we disagree, I first got to find something to agree on. You're right, man. These things are annoying and frustrating. I totally get it. Here's what I'm trying to make work. And so and so somebody tells us a story about that. And that goes back to your idea of how do you build it? You get humans to share. And why do I love the drip ongoing for micromessaging? Because we're constantly getting new stories from people that reinforce, or that if you're dealing with something, chances are somebody else is dealing with it over there. They don't want to hear a stuffy course. They want to hear, somebody's experience who just dealt with this in another part of the country and is like, yeah, oh my God, this just happened and this is how I dealt with it.
Yeah, not like, it's interesting you say, having these platitudes. And, I spent a lot of time talking to restaurants about core values and building those. And, there's a lot of, and 7 Shifts even here as a company, we have our core values. It's an acronym, there's different types of things. But it's like, what I always would ask is, okay, you say, we're, treat the customer like your friend, right? For example, whatever. It's like, all right, what does that actually look like in practice, rather than saying like, that sounds sweet, right? Sure. But it's interesting. And the pandemic is such a great example because it was asking 16-year-old, 18-year-old servers to suddenly be enforce public health like laws. And it was just insane. So,
here's one is that we like is treat everyone like you'd like them to treat your favorite family member. So talk to someone and assume that how you're talking to them, like if it's a customer, is how somebody would be talking to your grandma or something like that. And just take a moment and be like, would I knock that person out or would I appreciate that person? Because I knew my grandma would be difficult, but I wanted them to give leeway. Another one is assume every person you're walking into just got really bad news. And so when they walk in the door, just know that they might be carrying that in. How can you help them? So every word you say, come with the assumption of, this might have been, this person might be, you don't want to live in a dark moment and think all depressed, but it's giving a little bit of leeway. But that takes investing in the team, that they feel like they're empowered to do that they feel like they can make the calls on the spot, they can buy somebody something, they feel like they're supported. That's why I say you gotta, it's more than training. You gotta put a strong employee experience together. I also believe trust falls are mightier than training. No, I take this back. Checklists are mightier than trust falls if you want to build a healthy culture. You can have all the core values on the wall all day, but if Jenny gets to leave and no one tracked that she did her side work, and so somebody else gets to pick up the slack, they're pissed at each other. So checklists are mightier than trust falls in building a healthy culture.
Awesome. Let's dive into that a little bit. So checklist, is that something ArrowUp supports as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we work with a couple different companies where Wisetail's a great company where they have out of the box, or they have checklists that we kind of arrow them up. We have our own app and we do them. And we kind of look at them like checks more than check-in or checklists. So they're a little bit of check-ins, right? It's got a photo. It's how you phrase something. It's you can take a photo of something. You can have a GIF that's reminding you to do something. So it feels like you're in a little bit of a colorful experience that I love. It could be something as simple as, to a leader, did you say thank you to anybody today? Or to somebody else, an employee, or an opening side work is just go around and make sure that all the mats aren't overlapping each other to help, so no one trips and falls. So it's anything like that. You don't want to necessarily ask, how are you feeling? That's, unless you're there, it's just kind of like, I don't know. I want to ask, how are you? Unless you're absolutely there to respond to it. So it's little things, it's little reminders. So that's how I look at it. I think we make checklists far too sterile, and that's the heart of everything. Just give a little great image, great gift, great message, and a little check-in on something, and make it feel fun. So
how do you balance that with this stuff that actually has to get done, right? Like, sanitizing parts of the walk-in, or making sure things are temped and stuff like that. I mean, that's obviously part of it as well.
Yeah, and temp should be just a running thing. And if you're doing a daily thing like temp, I don't want a funny little, I want the least amount of time that I can mark that it's been done. So you have to know what your vibe, and you have to know what you're delivering. So some of that stuff, you just make it very sterile and get it out of the way, because otherwise you detract from all the other stuff. But sometimes you just put a funny little question in there. You put a funny little GIF in there next to it that's just kind of ridiculous. You do little things that create a little bit of a chuckle. Like, memes are great. You don't want to over meme it, but there's a great one we got of it. Still people love it. John Travolta just from, sitting there in the walk-in, it looks like looking around. From Pulp Fiction, like, what do I do next? And it's like, then you could put whatever you want next to it. Is the chicken on the bottom shelf? Whatever you want to do. Did you FIFO? So you can add a little bit of color, but it's great that you say it, because don't add color where no one wants it, because then you've overdone it. And that is where I will overdo it and be terrible, but our creative director is like, yeah, that wasn't cool, and he walks me back a little bit. That's why he's in charge of that stuff.
There you go. And I imagine it helps, like, with the drier stuff, right? If you have some fun stuff, like, did you, compliment a guest today? And then below that, it's like, did you make sure that the coffee hopper was filled, blah, blah, blah. It's like, instead of this just kind of boring, sterile checklist that kind of begs itself to be ignored after a while because you're just kind of like, oh, I got this.
Yeah. You take them off guard a little bit. Put something absolutely ridiculous in there that's just entirely ridiculous and makes them go like, wait, what? Because it pops you back into the moment. We learned that in our courses where we'll just put kind of ridiculous stuff or ridiculous options in answers that are just kind of like, wait, what? And it activates the brain again. So keep people on their toes. Do it in the person, you can join Arrow Up and we just kind of, we rock it out to everybody and it's great. Or figure out what works with your own, or blend it, or just kind of figure out what your personality is, right? If you're Guy Fieri's brand, you're gonna make it a little more, rock and roll than if you're something else, right?
Sure.
If you're a soft French restaurant,
right? Yeah, exactly. So I guess I was curious, with the built-in courses, how to balance that with, like you said, a Guy Fieri type restaurant that's very, hard rock and roll type of thing versus like, do you just kind of go for a general restaurant industry irreverence, and then just kind of let folks fill in the gap?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And if you want to make it more and again, we're building out more courses. We've kept them limited, and it's been leadership and compliance and safety and stuff. But as we're getting much deeper into the full matrix and onboarding, we're gonna answer that. We're gonna figure that out. But yeah, the colors are irreverent's a great way of looking at it, right? And we keep it kind of simple and neutral and cool, and then people can add their own stuff in there and make it modular. But at the end of the day, the culture of a restaurant is inside the four walls of a restaurant. So we're just in a very little amount of time trying to set the expectation, right? Restaurants are America's number one first job. My nephew, I told him we were working on this, and he's like, man, when I started, and not long ago, he's like, when I started at the restaurant and I walked in, and he's like, I had so much anxiety because I eat at restaurants, but all of a sudden I walked in the door and they're like, yeah, the GM. He's like, what's a GM, right? What's that? Like, there's so many basic stuff that we forget that we had to learn the hard way. And so you can really roll out a lot, right? Everybody should just know to hold the glass the bottom 50%, but not enough people are talking about it, and they're doing the claw, right? Let's just, or that you learned particular things. Let's roll that out in a fun, simple way. Then let the culture be the culture, right? That's how you do it. That's how I believe we can do it.
And I guess lastly, I just want to understand, as we kind of come up on time, is what are you excited about at Arrow Up this year? Courses that you're coming up with, or functionality, or what's getting you pumped up for 2025?
Yeah, building out this matrix. So listen, if anyone's listening, Jason at arrowuptraining.com, write to me what would be the ideal problem that you're solving that we can through a training or a checklist. What's cool is we're taking on we're expanding sort of our services a little bit. We're working with a couple really cool, well-known global brands to help refine all of their operations. And it's going a little bit outside the scope, but I like it because we're kind of going into optimizing their lines and their tools and taking sort of a Kaizen approach of saying, why are they moving 2 steps to the left if they can move to the right? And how do we simplify the employee experience and standardize everything and really look at it all to repair and maintenance, right? Because that matters so that everyone can do their job, going back to a stronger employee experience. So I'm excited for that because I think that will inform and make our training stronger. Plus, we're going to work with world-class brands who I'm going to pick up some of their tips and tricks that I didn't know or learn. So I'm really excited to bring those into our training, our out-of-the-box stuff. But going back, I want people to email me and say, hey, do you have a course on this? Because we're going deep into production, and we're coming out of the gates with a really cool model. I think it's cool, based on popular demand, with some partners trying to get 7 shifts to jump in, but we'll see how they go. And the idea is, this matrix is through product placement partnerships. Well, if people are learning about scheduling, well, aren't they learning about it on a 7-shift schedule as opposed to something else, right? If people are learning about POSs, learn on the right partnership. So what we're doing, though, is we're offering a freemium model. So here's what's you're gonna see with Arrow Up. You're gonna go to it. Pretty much all baseline courses of the 101s, the restaurant essential basics, are gonna be free. Any employee can click on it. They can go. They can basically learn the basics of how do you work in a restaurant for any job. Real basic stuff. Working together as a team. Hoping to have it, English and Spanish. Not doing it as this whole AI translatable stuff because I want interviews and people to talk. We'll blend it. But that, and then customers, and that will be supported by sponsorships and product placement. But then, so that's coming, right? Send me an email if you're interested. I'll let you know when we launch. Then what will happen is everyone will have the ability to upgrade to our full training platform where we can track it, share it, and then we're going to, if you'd like, partner you up with insurance companies to pick up the tab for it because you've proven yourself to be a safer company. So I'm really excited for this growth trajectory. So we're gonna be busy. I'm gonna be busy because I'm also just getting my hands in these other companies, again, with operations. I've missed it, so we're kind of bringing it all together to streamline the Arrow Up experience, the out-of-the-box experience for whether you're a mom and pop or 40 locations.
That's awesome. All right. Well, if folks want to find you, arrowup.com.
Arrowuptraining.com.
Arrowuptraining.com. And then Jason at arrowuptraining.com.
Yeah, arrowup.com's in our future, but now they want $40,000 and we're just not there yet. When we do the insurance, we'll do that. So yeah, let me know what courses you want. We'll make them and we'll give them to you.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat today. I think there's some awesome takeaways for folks to use. And, I hope you do check out Arrow Up. And just want to say thanks again.
Thanks. I know you've had some good people on, I've heard, in this podcast. So it's a good roster to join. So thank you for bringing us on board.
Thanks again for checking out this episode of The Pre-Shift. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review and rating and share it with one of your friends to help the show grow. Also, be sure to subscribe to our Food Runner newsletter. Once a month, you get a roundup of resources, practical tips, and industry leader insights to learn more quickly. Sign up at 7shifts.com/foodrunner. Check the link in the description. Until next time.